A few years ago, I moved into a one-bedroom apartment in Melbourne, Australia. It was my first time living on my own. The apartment block had been built in the 1930s. I'd been there for a few months when I came home from work one day and went into the bathroom. I saw something strange. A wooden board which had covered a hole in the ceiling that led to a small attic space lay fractured in two pieces on the ground. I examined the pieces. The board was an inch thick, and it would have taken a lot of force to break it. I thought the landlord had sent someone to work on the attic. I was frozen stiff with fear. Someone is up there for sure, I thought. I emailed pictures to the landlord asking if anyone had been there, with an undertone of annoyance since she hadn't warned me. Her reply read, "Please call me as soon as you are able to." I called and she explained that her last two tenants had said the same thing happened. She promised to replace the board and she did. A month later, I woke up one night around 4 a.m. My body was covered in goosebumps. It felt like someone was rubbing his or her hands on me. Everything was silent, but then I heard a dragging sound coming from above my bed. It was as if someone was pulling a sack of potatoes. I froze, convinced someone was up there. There is no way an animal could make that sound. After 5 minutes, I worked up the courage to turn on the light, armed myself with a cricket bat and walked to the bathroom. That's when I saw that the new board covering the hole was broken in two. I felt sick. The dragging sound had stopped, but I heard something else, whispering. The sound was clear and coming from the attic. It sounded like children's voices, and I could hear one sentence repeated over and over.
"It's your turn. It's your turn."
I switched on every light in the apartment to make things feel normal. It was 5 a.m. and dark outside. I watched TV to try to unwind. Then a fuse blew. My pet budgie, Dexter, whom I kept in the kitchen, usually never made a sound at night, but he started squawking like he was being strangled. I'd never heard him make those sorts of noises. He was screaming. I grabbed my car keys, ran out, sat in my car and waited there until the sun came up. When I saw people walking their dogs, this comforted me enough to go back in. The front door was open, but I figured I might have forgotten to close it when I ran out. I went to the kitchen to check on Dexter, but he wasn't in his cage. I felt sick again. All my windows were closed, so I looked everywhere inside. When I walked to the bathroom, I heard splashing. Dexter was half drowned in the toilet. I took him out, washed him, and dried him. I was so confused. At 8 a.m., I called the landlord and gave her a watered-down version of the night. "Oh, wow, you heard the whispering too," she said. I stayed in that apartment for another 18 months. I heard the whispering on a few occasions, and twice the board covering the hole in the ceiling moved. Although I live elsewhere now, the landlord recently called. She said that her new tenants had begged to speak with me about some of the stuff that's been going on there. Forget it, it's their problem now. I was about 13. I'd had experiences before, some were very intense, but this was the worst of them all. The house was terrifying, the air felt heavy, and everything seemed darker than it should be. A lot of weird goings-on happened, such as my mom hearing my voice apparently screaming at my cat when I was at school, which I would never have done, she was an angel. The silverware clashing around and the drawer opening and slamming, things disappearing and showing up in strange places, or not at all. Once I was home alone and I saw with my own eyes a smoky white figure appear in the kitchen, just materializing out of nowhere. I sat there stunned and watched, but when it started moving, I ran and I stayed out in the driveway until someone came home. But what really changed everything for me was one night I fell asleep. I always slept with the TV on or even the light on. I did not want to be caught alone in the dark. When I opened my eyes, there was a young woman hovering above me. She was very still, like she was standing, no expression on her face. She had pale white skin like porcelain, and she wore a sky blue dress with white lacing. It looked old, very old. She had black hair a little longer than mine. I was sleep-deprived at that point from being terrorized every night. My brain wasn't working correctly. I didn't even really register her. I just turned over on my side and fell back asleep. The dream I had was horrifying. I was in the pitch black and I felt something made of pure malice, hate, and frankly evil in the room with me. I sat up and I started leaping toward my door. I didn't even get close. Suddenly I opened my eyes and I was back in bed, in the dark. It kept going. I felt like I was fighting for my life to get to the door. Each time I would get closer. At some point I opened my eyes and she was standing next to my bed. I got a good look at her then. She didn't have the top half of her head. It wasn't gory like you're probably imagining. From the nose up, it just faded into nothing. It simply wasn't there. Then she smiled at me. I can't describe what it was like. But that smile was the worst thing I've ever seen. Everything appeared normal on her face. Perhaps the smile was a bit stretched, but it was normal. It made my blood turn to ice because I could see the evil in it and I was at her mercy. Somehow she forced me back into the dream. Eventually I got to the point where I touched the doorknob. When I finally woke up, it was early morning, maybe 6 a.m. The TV was still on. I was tortured that entire night. I ran out of my room, so I knew it was real. I was free. I was alive. Later, I described her incorrectly to my mom's boyfriend, who's sensitive to the paranormal. I said she didn't have eyes, and he said he saw something similar. But it wasn't like she had black holes where her eyes should be. He said he saw a girl that he thought was me sitting at the end of their bed one night. But her head faded away. Rubbed his eyes and she was gone. I was shocked. Someone else saw her and they were telling the truth. The last experience was before I got really, really sick. My mom, her boyfriend, and I were sitting at the dining room table. I felt her presence materialize in another part of the house. That's never happened before or since. The chandelier above the table starting swinging, not back and forth, in a circle. We all stood up. I felt her coming closer. I had 2 cats at the time. They lost it. Fur raised, hissing, spitting. They took off into the bedroom. I felt her on the move. She came through the dining room, but I couldn't see anything. Nobody actually saw her, but I felt her. The cats chased her through the house, into the living room, then into the hallway to my room, then into my room. Once she entered my room, I felt that heavy presence disappear. The chandelier lost momentum. My cats let their guard down and came back into the dining room, acting like nothing happened. I'll never forget it. Ever. I have an intense phobia of the paranormal now, and I really think that I could have been taken by her. I have no idea what she was trying to do. A few days after this, I was hospitalized for 3 months. We lost the rental, and I never returned. In 1980, I rented out a bottom apartment. I had been there about a month when my bedside alarm clock went off at my normal 6 a.m. wake-up time to start getting ready to head into work. So I sit up in bed, reach over and turn it off, switch on my bedside lamp, and then look out of my open bedroom doorway that I could see straight into my kitchen. And standing there was a solid, full-bodied man. He was just standing there staring straight at me. I was certain that he had broken into my apartment and was going to harm me. I looked him straight in the eyes as he stood silent and motionless, just watching me. I started screaming bloody murder and beating on the wall beside my bed, in hopes that the man renting out the apartment beside of me would hear me and come in to help. After I had screamed for about 5 seconds, all the while still staring at him, I finally closed my eyes so I wouldn't see him coming at me, and when I opened them back up, he was gone. I was shaking and crying so bad that I could barely get out of bed, but I managed to creep into the kitchen, checked the front door to make sure that it was still locked and deadbolted. It was. Checked all of the windows to make sure they were closed and locked. They were. Then I was afraid he ran and hid while I had shut my eyes, and was now hiding in my bathroom, so again I crept into there. No one was there. Then I lastly checked my closet and living room. No one was there either. Once I calmed myself down enough and knew that I was safe, I thought about what he looked like and was wearing, and remembered him vividly. He was in his late 60s, early 70s in age, medium to slim build, 6 feet tall, had a gray beard and hair and dark-colored eyes. He was wearing a dark gray late 1800s style suit, white button-up shirt, black tie, hat, and black boots. So there was no way that that man was anything but a ghost, and not some wispy floating see-through apparition, but as solid as someone alive. I pray that I never see him again. One night when I was 10, I was woken up by my bedroom door opening, followed by someone sitting on my bed. I felt my leg grazed and the bed sink under a person's weight. It's just Mom, I thought, and I opened my eyes. It was not my mom. I found an eyeless boy. He had black empty sockets about my age sitting at the foot of my bed. He extended his hand and in it was a little box. I was startled but reached out. He pulled back. I reached again and said, "Give it." Then I blinked, and when I reopened my eyes he was gone. But I could still see the imprint where he'd sat on my bed. Fast forward 5 years. My girlfriend came over to do homework. After she finished, she took a nap while she waited for her parents. When they arrived, I tried waking her up. She opened her eyes suddenly, looking up at a corner where the wall met the ceiling. She pointed there and went back to sleep. I shook her again. She came to full consciousness and I explained what she'd done. She looked haunted. Up on the wall, I saw a little boy with no eyes. He was there in a Spider-Man pose, staring at me. I freaked out and told her my story about the same kid. Fast forward another 5 years. I was with the same girlfriend and we had a 2-year-old. We were living in my parents' house, in my old room. My daughter started waking up at the same time every night, and she'd talk. After a while, I noticed she had almost the same conversation every night. I playfully asked her once whom she was talking to. She said, "It's a little boy. He's nice. He's lost and looking for his mommy." My daughter's nightly conversations continued until we got our own place later that year.